In your opinion, what are some of the main reasons why women who might even get to those who might get to those entry level positions eventually end up like dropping out or leaking out of the pipeline?
So we do have the challenge, and it's not just in science and technology. There is that challenge of keeping women in the workforce and in the early stages of their career, and creating a path for them to move forward and also have outside considerations. So I think women who get married and have a family should be able to be just as successful as those who make the choice not to do that. I think, again, this is why my personal theme, I've gotten really interested in it again. I think my generation was, go out, get a job, and do it, and be very female friendly or friendly to particularly younger women and men who are going into the field. In my case, science writing. We've had a probably much more equal group in science journalism. We're not representative of journalism at large either, because again, more women in political reporting. But I think it's creating the right environment. And what I've seen, I actually just had published in the fall pretty long article about sexual harassment in science. So it sadly fit in with, even though I started it much earlier than the Me Too movement and some of the horrendous examples that came out in Hollywood and around the country. It turned out really a few years before that, in 2015, there was an egregious example where some women went public at the University of California, Berkeley, about an astronomer who was sexually harassing graduate students and who was one of the top people in his field. And so that was kind of an awakening. It's a few years ago. Everyone has recognized that, again, there are people that are not only are they not with you, but they are running in your way. And so in science in particular, there can be roadblocks, which is at least the academic or the laboratory situation or field work. There's a lot of opportunities for younger women or women of any ages to be sexually harassed in various ways. And again, the definition is pretty broad, and so it can be creating a hostile or unwelcome climate, and it can be, actual assault. And so I think that had still been hidden, and that is a subtle, again, this is one part of the larger question of gender equity and creating a welcoming environment, even beyond the questions of sexual harassment, because sexism itself, I think, is, particularly in science, has continued apace. But I think there's a huge movement now, and a very active movement, which I think is aided by the fact that there are a lot of women going into science, and they're organized and aware, and there are now, fortunately, women in leadership positions, deans and others, who can help to bring the climate and welcome environment. But I did find in researching this story, which I had been doing for quite a while, that in many ways in laboratory situations, particularly in fields like physics or astronomy or engineering, where the women did not feel supported, they felt there were the more subtle forms of sexism, which undermined their confidence and their feeling of enthusiasm for
Mm-hmm.
what they wanted to do. They were still enthusiastic about science. They just weren't enthusiastic about how they fit in. And as I say, even more challenging are any of the men or women of color or of different sexual orientations. So there's a whole group of individuals who are facing challenges throughout the workplace. But I think science is a little more rigid, and it really, in my opinion, the real need was to have these women leaders in science. And so it's quite an active movement, and I have heard a number of women, worked with women who have really transformed, say, astronomy and physics, and a woman named Meg Urey at Yale, where, and it wasn't that long ago, I think it was in the 90s, where she was the first woman hired in the physics department, or who got tenure, I don't remember exactly, and who then went on to become the first chair of the department, and who has been a real leader in the societies to come up with change. So I think having organizations such as scientific societies, in this case, who kind of bring people together and also emphasize the social dynamics and what you need to do to be a good scientist, which includes having a welcoming environment. So I think this Me Too movement that has spread through the U.S. about sexual harassment and is in many other countries as well, I think that took root in science in a different way without that label, because there's been a lot of recognition and studies over the last many years about this problem, in some cases more subtle, in other cases really not subtle, but also the chain of command has always meant that if you're a graduate student, male or female, you are really hired, it's hierarchical, and so that person above you has a lot of control on your future, and that's where many of the uncomfortable gender or sexually related uncomfortable situations have arisen.
Yeah.